I'll run through the bios again. Joining us for the second panel again is Michael Nye, the content creator and digital marketing specialist who runs a podcast called Evolvement and a marketing agency in the crypto space. And then we also have James Gonzalez, a 19-year-old crypto trader, and Terranova. Do you want to give a short bio on yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Terranova. I'm a professional growth hacker. So basically my profession is I grow businesses. So nowadays I help projects like ICOs to grow in some metrics that they need to, be that PR, be that any retention, be that revenue, anything that they need. Basically, that's it. And I'm also an advisor to a few ICOs.
How do you say your first name?
Vinicius.
Vinicius.
Terranova. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. It's very complex, so that's why people call me Terra, Terranova, Terry. So
it's one of a kind.
It's a cool name. I like it.
Thanks. I like it too.
Thanks, bro.
All right. Well, let's kick off the second panel, which is going to be the future of ICO investing. So as we all saw back at the end of 2017, 2018, we had a huge amount of money coming into the space, or maybe it wasn't even money. It was just crypto shifting around into different projects. And whether those projects actually cashed it out is a different question, but not something we're going to cover here. But total ICO funding for the month of January 2018 topped out at around $1.5 billion notional. For the month of January 2019, it had dropped by a factor to around $160 million. Obviously, the decline in crypto prices has affected many current ICOs' abilities to raise significant amount of capital. And I posed this in the last group, but I'm going to ask again: was that ICO phase a flash in the pan? Was it a flash in the pan, or is it going to continue? Or will we see? Not an or, but and are we going to see the effects of that ICO boom continue to persist into the future? About how companies raise capital in 2019 and beyond.
I mean, I think fundraising is always going to be necessary in the crypto space. I don't think that we're going to see people doing the traditional ICO model very often anymore. I don't think, and if they do, I don't think it's going to be successful. I think that there will be a model of ICOs that work, maybe for like projects and ventures that actually have like utility tokens, like actual tokens that will be utilized in their ecosystem as a real utility, not just a speculative investment. And then I think STOs, security token offerings, are going to be huge. I think there's going to be a huge hype phase on security token offerings. And I think it potentially has the ability to revolutionize a lot of the current processes that we see.
Yeah. May I jump in, I guess? In my opinion, the thing about raising funds for ICOs, it reminds me for the early times of startup investment, where a lot of people actually raised investments for their startups with only like a PowerPoint or something like this. And that was 2017, okay? It was basically madness all the time. And you didn't need an actual business plan to raise funds for your ICO. So I saw ICOs for smart mirrors or whatever, and people actually invested on this. So I think that ICO investment is kind of mimicking what happened with startup investment in the early days, and it will start to slow down a little bit. You're gonna have like this big filter where only the big ones that actually have a business or a good community behind it. I say business and community because some are dApps, some are protocols, so they have different models. But only the big ones will survive, and they will actually make the next standard, the next pattern to raise investments. So I expect it to go down a little bit. It won't stop. I think STOs are really a good model to follow with regulations. But for ICOs, yeah, we're gonna see them putting a lot more work to the projects. We haven't seen too much raising because not many projects are actually executing. So now they need to execute prior to the raising of the funds. So you have less projects, you have less investors, you have, of course, the bear market that impacted.
And I think I'm actually, all right, so I'll hop in. So I think a lot of the same things about the ICO market. I think it's going to start slowing down actually. And I think the STO market is really going to pick up. Since I came from really investing into the stock market before actually finding crypto, a lot of my friends had private equity funds, and trying to ask them to invest into crypto early 2017 was really hard because of there was really no regulation standpoints. So now that regulatory standpoints are coming in with STOs, I think a lot of new capital is going to be entering the market, which will bring the next hyper wave, I think, of the market boom.
I'm going to disagree here. Well, I at least pose a different opinion. Part of the reason which made ICOs so popular and so interesting for people back in last year, when you could just get into pretty much anything and then flip it the next day, was mainly the liquidity. First and foremost, is that you could, within a few days or even a few hours, get tokens back, take them to the exchange, and then trade them, and then you'd be seeing significant returns through there. Secondly, the lack of regulatory influence in the space at the time pretty much let any type of investors put money in, both accredited, non-accredited. Really, no rules on anyone coming in and putting any amount of money. And third, I don't know if there's, let's just stick with those two. So, the decline of those two things, in that you're starting to see more and more projects simply hold tokens with STOs. I know I don't want to make this too US centric, but in the United States, usually if you're doing an STO, there's a 12-month lockup before you can trade tokens. And then the introduction of all the regulatory rules really raises costs for companies, and slows down the trade of, slows down capital from moving afterwards after all the funds have raised. So I kind of think that, at least in my opinion, that the craze which happened last year was a one-time thing, that the utility token boom, as it was, probably won't happen again, because we'll shift towards STOs. And STOs is just a new derivative, a new type of VC investing, right? And it'll be limited to different types of crypto funds, accredited investors, people looking for alpha at the edges of what they're. Actually, it won't just be tech companies, right? It'll be theoretically, it's all sorts of companies that will be having ICOs in the future. But in my opinion, like the utility token boom is over. There just isn't a market for that. And we're seeing that now with people dumping scores and scores of ERC20 tokens. I know that some people will bring up different projects like Augur and ZRX and a few other projects which are providing services right now, but again, it's very difficult for most ERC20 tokens to get liquidity for them and to find an actual market. So I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts in response to that.
Yeah, I mean, for ICOs, to invest in an ICO right now, you have to look back to the experience that investors have and actually users had with the projects you invested in. I mean, we all invested in projects that, was just a lot of dust and did a 10x, but when you actually look at how people are using it, how people are marketing the projects, and the retention, the amount of churn they have from the platform, you kind of realize that the biggest factor that makes people don't trust in ICOs anymore is I mean, it's not the biggest, but it's a big one for me, at least for dApps that brings mass adoption, is the fact that they have a lot of friction. So to use my app, my dApp, I have to go to an exchange. I have to buy my cryptocurrency. I have to put it in my wallet. Then I have to stake it or just something like this. And then I can finally use that messaging app that I really want. Or I can basically give up on my privacy to Google and use it in like 3 minutes. And I'm lazy as hell. You know, that's how it works with the general consumer. So if you don't make an ICO that really takes out the friction between the user and the solution, you won't have many investors. I mean, we all know that protocols, we have like 10 protocols in the last month or something like this. So it's not sexy anymore. dApps are not sexy so far because they don't have the friction cut, you know. It's very tough. I understand your point, Samuel, about it's done, it's gone, but it's kind of it's not done because it doesn't work. It's done because it's poorly executed. You know, that's my opinion.
See, I really think I think the ICO market's really in its lows right now is because really there's no capital for funds to be raised, right? So what I think what's really going to happen is with the STO market, it's going to bring a nice new more liquidity to this market, right? Because now we're going to be able to bring tangible assets and tokenize them, and it's going to allow more people to actually come in here and buy fractional ownership to these tokens. And it will bring, I think, a longevity to capital to this market, which can then be thrown into the ICO market, and they'll probably bounce back and forth.
I mean, but most of that won't be captured in the crypto markets, right? I mean, you could tokenize something and put it on the Ethereum blockchain, but it doesn't mean that you're actually needing Ethereum to own those tokens, right? Those tokens could just be issued by some sort of broker dealer who then moves them around, and there's no actual exchange of ETH to the actual tokens. You could maybe use some stable coin, or they have dollar accounts on the exchanges that they're trading them to acquire those tokens in the first place. I think my thing is that we had so many projects last year, and this is probably the third point that I wanted to get to, is that we had so many projects last year that just would throw blockchain onto the end of what they're doing, right? Blockchain for the supply chain, blockchain for space, blockchain for whatever, you throw any market sector on the end, and then they go off and try to raise $30 million without actually finding out if there's an actual problem there, or understanding if the application of the technology is going to really make a competitive and comparative difference from what is actually existing. And I think we're running into that now. We're seeing a lot of projects either figure out that they don't need a token and that they're doing some sort of refund and moving towards equity, or it just doesn't work and there's no market demand. So like everybody's talking about apps, but really there's no demand for dApps right now.
Besides taxes,
Yeah.
May I actually, you brought a point there. Many ICOs will actually raise funds by equity right now, equity right now, and that's kind of a market that is going on. Okay, there are a lot of projects raising equity rounds because they held the Ethereum, and they are actually good projects. I mean, they just didn't have the maturity to cash out. Why? That's something they needed to do. I think that if you want to raise an ICO right now, you should do it in stable coins. First of all, we have stable coins that are able to do smart contracts now, and yeah, equity round, it's very interesting. It's going on right now. Another point, I don't know if you guys agree with me, but another point that made a lot of investors get out, and that's huge because it impacts in the community as well. It's that we don't have old school ICOs anymore. You know, an old school ICO is just a smart contract that is going to be published at I don't know 10 p.m. and then everybody around the globe will do a guess war and try to buy this ICO. Right now, basically, if you wanna invest in an ICO, you gotta do that on the exchanges because everything is being sold on private because of regulation fear. You know, everybody has this fear of regulators, so they have to do a private sale. They can't do a public sale, and it makes a lot of people don't want to invest anymore. It takes out a lot of money from the market because what is your incentive if somebody's selling to you the bags of coins they have uh, because they got like a premium price, a better price in a funding round, like the seed round had the private investment round, and now the regular Joe that could invest in any project in 2017 can't do that anymore. He'll just buy. He won't help you fund your project because you're already funded. So he's not a part of your history as a company, and that makes a lot of uh, sense to the investor. I mean, he wants to be a part of the build of your company, you know. And it turns out that it made it did made a lot of people stop investing in ICOs. If you're doing private sale, I'm not investing in ICO anymore. That's what actually happened, you know.
So there was a couple of trends that actually happened towards, well, in 2018, right, in 2017 and 2018, is that for one, the average raise went from something like $7 million, maybe not even that, maybe like $6 million in the middle, towards the end of 2016, beginning of 17, to 30 million at January, February in 2018. So you had a huge increase in the amount of money that people were raising, and it didn't mean that the projects were any better. It just saw that the projects themselves saw that they could raise huge amounts of money at the time, and they jumped on the bandwagon. Now we're seeing the contractions back again, and you are seeing companies going back towards raising that $5-6 million round. And just to make a point, there was a project called LTO Network, which had a old school ICO, if you want to call it that, where they had a gas war, and it should be more fair, and they only raised about $2.5 million. But even after the token issuance was done and it made it onto an exchange, it still went down. even after one day. So I don't know where the sentiment in the market comes in, and it's just going to be a little bit irrational until we move out of this place where many of these ICOs get washed out.
Yeah, I mean, I saw people trying to complicate things that shouldn't be that complicated.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the token distribution. So I saw in 2017, we saw a lot of projects selling like 60% of the tokens. You got everything on the TG, and that's it. Now we have companies selling 20% of the tokens, and now you receive from your contribution, you receive like 10% each month. So for the investor that is short term, he needs to do a 10x because in his opinion, he won't be able to recover the money in the next months. So it makes, there's a few things that, in my opinion, brings people to not invest in ICOs anymore. I don't know, Michael, do you have any opinion on those structures for ICOs?
I mean, I think that I got a lot of opinions on it.
You've been so silent. He's just waiting to drop the base.
I've got a lot of opinions on it, man. And I think that, like, the fact of the matter is, the ICO market, it isn't relevant right now. It just isn't relevant. Nobody's looking to invest in even most coins that are already on the market and that have proven fundamentals or somewhat proven fundamentals. And they're definitely not looking to invest in ICOs. And that's why we've moved more into the private sales structure as well as the equity structure. Most of the ICOs that I meet recently when I go to conferences and things like that, they're not even trying to sell their tokens in a private sale. They're actually trying to sell them sell to investors equity, because that's the only possible way that a lot of these companies are going to raise money. The reason for that being is because the ICO model is 100% broken. Back when ICOs were popping and really popular, even into like May of 2018 timeframe, I would meet with founders and I would talk with them and they'd be like, oh, well, we just raised 10, $20 million, $30 million, whatever it is. But their mentality was messed up. Their mentality was not that of a business person, mostly probably because most of these people didn't have or don't have the business skills to run a company that is valued at $30 million right off of a raise. And especially to do that by raising $30 million in 30 minutes, many times even quicker than 30 minutes. But most of these, their mentality was just, it was messed up. It was twisted. They would literally tell me, well, if we get on a good exchange, we can sell some of our tokens that we have from the company and we can make more money. So if we run out of $30 million, we have maybe 10 or $20 million or probably more in money that we can sell via our own token. And if all of that fails too, we can always sell equity, right? Like this is not the mentality. This is not the mindset of a successful company. This is not how an Amazon or an Apple was ever built. And it's not how any successful company will ever be built, at least from the mentality perspective. So I think that what we saw happen and what we will see happen are going to be two different things. Like James said, the STO market, I'm bullish on STOs in many different regards. I'm interested to see how the market's going to react to them because it's not going to be the same as ICOs. ICOs, you could go anywhere in the world, turn on your VPN, go into a gas war and fight for the X amount of tokens that got listed and then sell those for 3-5x the next week or something like that. For STOs, and also, mind you, you could do that without KYC or AML or things like that for a long period of time. STOs are going to be very, very different where they're going to require stricter KYC, stricter AML. They're going to be much more regulated. And I'm still curious. I've talked with a lot of people about this. They think that it's still going to be very bullish for the market, but I'm still curious about how the market's going to react to something like that. It's going to be very different.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of I think there's a lot of possibilities with STOs in the futures. I think the U.S. will probably, hopefully Europe will re-look at their existing laws. I know that we have Reg CF right now for crowdfunding, which allows non-accredited investors to invest into investments like an ICO. But there are specific rules about how much they can invest in a year, based on the percentage of how much they make, or just a fixed limit. Additionally, the lockups and everything, I think, will not be to everyone's benefit, like it was for the ICO investors of 2017, where you get your tokens immediately. I guess I would want to pose the question to you is, do you think that there's a market for utility tokens in the next year or 2 years? I would think that you've seen we've been talking about STOs, but one of the other ways that a company could release a token is by, let's say you develop some sort of protocol and then you just release it to the community to start mining. So there's no pre-mine, there's no initial token issuance, there's no ICO. That seems to be quite popular at the moment with some of the protocols which have been released, like Ren and Beam. And then we have the STOs on the other side. So do you think that there's a path in the middle for continued issuance of ICO utility token or utility tokens through an ICO? we can go with you, James.
Okay, yeah. All right, so I'm going to say no short term. Long term, there will be, but I think short term, I think STOs. I'm always going back to STOs, but I think STOs are going to have to really get implemented into this market first to actually bring liquidity back into the market, you know? And that liquidity will come in and then it will seep over into other markets, right, into cryptocurrencies. And then that's when the utility cases will start forming. And then I think the growth will start again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested to see how the STO market develops, and I know the next panel that we're actually having is going to be on STOs, so we can get much more into depth there. I don't know. I just worry about the scores of companies which came out. I mean, we're pushing on CoinMarketCap up to close to 2,000 coins and tokens now. I don't think that we need even 99% of those, and probably most of those will disappear over the next even year or 2 years. One of the things that that you can go check out is if you go to CoinMarketCap, you can go back a year or 2 years or even 3 or 4 years and see what was at the top back then and what other coins were listed then, and most of them have disappeared. Most of them don't exist anymore, or their market cap values have depleted to almost nothing. So, I think we're going to start to see the rise of a huge amount of dead coins over the next several months and years.
We're already seeing that.
Yeah.
We already see a lot of projects dying and dying brutally from the honesty of the reality. I gotta be honest with you. I've been in startup accelerator programs, and I got some experience on it. I mean, even the good projects, a lot of good projects that I met, they don't even know what are the target audience that they need to reach. They raise it like $50 million and they never did a product market fit study. So that doesn't help, but they raise it like millions and millions of dollars, and now they have a chance to step back, start to study, and actually pivot or do something that makes sense. Hire a team to study the market, have a business development actually done in your project, because that might help. And probably protocols will be the only ones to survive because they will be used to launch maybe STOs or something. I don't see many adoption. Maybe PandyX with the POS, Sovereign with the identity stuff, but I don't see projects that don't have this kind of mass adoption thing surviving at all. Doesn't fit. It's like 99.99% will die.
Right. Yeah, I think early 2018 or a little bit of late 2017. I think a lot of the CEOs of the projects knew that this was going to happen. So I think a lot of them were just spending the money on unnecessary things, because you would go to conferences and you would just see guys wanting to ball out, but not spending money on essentials to the project. So, I mean, that was a quick sign to me. So I stopped investing into ICOs kind of like late 2017, and it's really stopped all of 2018.
Yeah, I think it's been the case for most of us. So we've come to the end of our time period here. I want to thank you guys for joining, Michael and James and Terranova. Really had a great panel here, getting some good insight on the ICO market and the future of ICOs. Next, we're going to be moving to the next panel, which will be STOs. Be close to what we're talking about, but we are going to bring in a couple of experts who are going to help describe the growing STO market and the potential for bringing us back to all-time highs there. So we're going to switch over. We got a couple of new people coming in, and we'll kick off here in the next few minutes.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks, Michael. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.